Hello and welcome to Become the Teapot. I'm Ian.
And so am I. And each episode we discuss comics in relation to the big screen adaptations that they inspired. This week we have that rarest of art forms, a comic book movie starring Ryan Reynolds. And no, it's not Deadpool. Neither is it Deadpool 2. Nor is it X-Men Origins Wolverine. And no, it's not Blade Trinity. No, this week we discuss... Oh, and it's not R.I.P.D. either. This week, for better or worse, we will be discussing 2011's Green Lantern and comparing it to the 2004 story Green Lantern Rebirth and the 2008 arc Green Lantern Secret Origin, both written by Geoff Johns. Ian, I think I know what the answer is going to be, but what did you think of the film?
I mean, this film it's a complete mess, really.
Oh!
It doesn't know what it's trying to be.
No.
You've got comedy, horror bits, you've got the romance, the sci-fi. It is terrible.
So this is the first film that we've talked about that you haven't liked?
I didn't say that. I said it's terrible. I said it's a bad film, but you'll be surprised that I do like it.
Oh my god. Serious question.
Yeah.
What is the last film you saw that you didn't like?
Casablanca?
Brilliant.
No, that's not a last film, but that is one that sticks out in mind.
What didn't you like about Casablanca?
Slow. It's slow and nothing happens.
Okay.
When I say that I like this film, I think I am being a bit generous. I think the main reason that I like it is because I like Ryan Reynolds.
Right. But do you feel that he's the right fit for this role in this film? I mean, it's difficult to tell because every role that Ryan Reynolds plays is Ryan Reynolds. Don't get me wrong, I quite like that as well. You know, I like what he does, but it doesn't fit all films, I find.
I think in this film, yes. If it was someone else who was the title role in this film, I wouldn't like it. He's the only part of it that I do like. I would prefer to watch Fantastic Four 2 again than watch this again.
I think I agree with you, yeah. And I didn't like Fantastic Four 2.
I mean, this film is it's so slow as well. It clocks in just under 2 hours.
Yeah, it's about 2 hours long. It feels like longer.
I think they should have cut this down to about 1.5 hours.
Mm.
And there are plenty of bits in it that can be cut. There's a fair few scenes of just purely bad writing and bad acting.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's too much going on as well. You know, like you said, it's a bit of everything, but I just think there's too many plot lines sort of crammed in, which is why it has to have this sort of 2-hour runtime. But the problem is, what is happening on the screen is not interesting. So you said bad acting there. What actors in particular? Obviously not Ryan Reynolds, but...
It's a mixture of acting and the writing, really. Like, Taika Waititi's obviously part of this film, which I forgot about.
Yeah, well, he's sort of cosplaying as Richard Ayoade, isn't he, from the IT crowd?
Yeah, he's got that sort of weird, quirky vibe to him. But yeah, there's a bit like... I'm not sure whether it's down to the acting or the script, but when he first sees Green Lantern, he's like, whoa, oh my god, you're green. Really hamming it up. But the scene before this, at the gala, he literally saw him. He had on that suit and the suit was green. So it kind of feels like that they filmed that scene to happen before the gala.
I think there's a fair amount of meddling has gone on in this film. It feels like, to me anyway, that there's something has gone wrong in the edit afterwards to try and make everything work. I mean, that starts right from the first scene where there's just this huge exposition dump of a voiceover just telling you about things with CGI, where they have to say, here's the world that's been built, here's Oa, here's all of the other bits and pieces. And I kind of think that if you had approached that more like Guardians of the Galaxy or something like that, where it was all sort of done in media res, you know, establish the action, explain the details later, it probably would have worked better.
Yeah, but this film, actually, you can compare it to Fantastic Four 2. I mean, was there a reason that you put these back to back?
Not really, no. I wanted a Marvel followed by a DC, and I thought two terrible films on the trot would be funny. But other than that...
I mean, because these films both start in literally the same way, as you just said. You've got the sort of camera that flies through space. You've got a big old scary cloud. So it's the return of the scary cloud. But this one has a face. And it also has a mid-credit scene, which doesn't do anything, you know. Oh, here's a sequel that won't happen.
Which I think is a shame, because I like Mark Strong as an actor, and I think his sort of Sinestro as the villain could have been quite an interesting setup. I think it certainly probably would have been more interesting than the villains we got in this film.
Well, yeah. So what was your first impression of Hal?
I mean, it's just Ryan Reynolds. And it says a lot about comic book diversity that Ryan Reynolds can play 90% of the male characters.
Yeah.
And I think this actually came out the same year as Captain America. And I remember there was some discussion about Ryan Reynolds playing Captain America as well. And again, every single character.
Yeah, no. But yeah, I mean, I think in this, Hal comes across as this very early 2000s douchebag.
So Ryan Reynolds.
But also, he's the cool, fun uncle. He turns up late in his sports car and is like, hey, kid. And then that's the only part we see with the child.
Yeah. It was weird that they threw the brothers in because they have literally one scene and their nephew, and then you just don't see them again.
I mean, we'll probably go into this in a bit, but I do like that they try to incorporate that because there is the relationship between him and his two brothers within the comics.
Yeah.
I like that they tried to fold that in, but it didn't really work.
It's because it didn't go anywhere. You know, you should have either lent into that and had it be a recurring thing throughout with an arc that came to a conclusion, or just left it out entirely. To throw in one scene of him with his family and how they think he's a screw up and then not have any resolution to that at all was just a waste of 5 minutes of the film.
Yeah. Going back to what you said about Guardians of the Galaxy, I think that someone like James Gunn, not saying he has to do it, but someone who has his sort of style and look, that would work.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Martin Campbell is a bad director. You know, he did Casino Royale and GoldenEye. He's done a lot of fun films. I do feel like there's a bit of studio interference here, and I don't think Parallax is the best villain for your origin story as well. It just seems like, as I said before, a lot going on in one film. And so as such, each aspect of that gets very little focus. You just dart around from piece to piece, and with exception of Ryan Reynolds' Hal, who isn't particularly interesting, nothing else gets much fleshing out at all. You just have a sort of Hector Hammond going from sort of skeevy to skeevy with a big head, looking a bit like Ron Jeremy. And then, you know, all these other little characters, you know, the family dynamic, and then Hector's dad thrown in there, Carol's dad, and none of it gets enough focus to make any of them remotely likable or to give you any reason to care about any of them.
Yeah.
So when Hector kills his dad, it's like, okay.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, he's dead. That's sad.
Yeah. And then things like Amanda Waller being thrown in there just, you know, as a scientist, first of all, for some reason, and then sort of killed off.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I hadn't realised or I forgot, but I was quite shocked to see that she was in this. And it's like, oh, yeah, she's in it for like 2 scenes.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And you got Angela Bassett playing her as well. Yes, you got a good actor.
Yeah, I mean, with the idea of a sequel that obviously they try to plan, it's weird how they killed her off. Because surely, if let's say this film did start a cinematic universe, you'd want to keep her alive.
You would think so, and especially because this came out in 2011, which is obviously, as I said, the same year as Captain America, the same year as Thor. You know, after Marvel have started building their cinematic universe. So you would have thought they would have wanted to do the same with this, but they seem to kill off all the ancillary characters they didn't want to use.
Yeah, I don't really understand what they were trying to do, but I mean, as I said, it could be a bad mix of script and how it was put together.
Yeah, which is sort of DC's problem in general, I find, is they don't set out with the right planning in advance. You know, their cinematic universes so far have not been well mapped out.
Yeah, I mean, let's not go on to it. Yeah, so we've got this far into the conversation. Shall we talk about the suit?
Yeah, I mean, there was the suits and there were some alien creatures which were very humanoid. And I think that it all could have been done with makeup and practical effects. I don't see why they had to do that with CGI. You know, I think some of the more outlandish aliens, absolutely. Some of the planets and, you know, all the space scenes, of course. But, you know, the suits...
I understand what they were trying to do, I guess, because when this came out, you've got 2 versions of what your suit could be. It could be just latex and leather, like early X-Men films, or you've got the Spider-Man suit. Those are the 2 types of suits that you could sort of do.
Well, you say that, but again, this came out the same year as Captain America, and they had sort of transitioned his outfit from, in the comics, quite a spandex-looking suit to what you see in the film, which is a much more, you know, sort of realistic materials. I understand that it's an alien material that's making up his suit, but yeah, I just feel like there could have been an updating to it that didn't require CGI to make the whole suit. It could have just been, he had a practical suit, and then they added CGI flourishes.
Yeah.
You know, like the lantern symbol or something.
And that weird sort of green glow.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like they did for Deadpool, where obviously he's wearing an actual outfit, but they then CGI aspects of it, like the face when the eyes move and things like that.
I mean, yeah, and I don't get why his eyes change as well. His eyes go like sort of white with little green circles in them.
I think it's because in the comics he sort of has that domino mask with his eyes whited out, and I think they wanted to give that effect, but without losing his eyes entirely. So they left little weird clear pupils. Yeah, he just looked really weird afterwards.
Yeah, the one bit that I did like is when he first sees Carol, and she's like, "Hal, is that you?" He's like, "No." It's like, I know it's you. It's a small mask. Because that's something that I've always like questioned about this sort of thing. You know, heroes with like half masks, like Batman or like a Spider-Man mask. Yeah, fair enough. You can't really tell who it is. But like people like Hal or even Robin, it's not that hard to see, especially when like your whole head is there with your hair and, you know, your beard or whatever. You can clearly tell it's them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that bit, I was like, yes, thank you. Some film has now pointed that out, which now makes sense to me.
Well, also, this is post-Iron Man, so they seem to be less afraid of having the hero reveal his alter ego. Unlike a lot of old films where a lot of the drama was based around him hiding it and, you know, will they or won't they find out? Whereas you found after Iron Man and the end of that where he just reveals that he's Iron Man, Man of Steel, Green Lantern, all of these films just had it that the partner knew about it and it wasn't a problem.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the mask as well, when he first goes to the alien planet, what's it called again?
Oa,
thank you. When he first goes there and the mask goes on and then comes off, the guy he's talking to, I don't know all the alien names, he says, "Oh, your mask will come and go to hide your identity."
Yeah.
So as soon as she points out that he's Hal, it then obviously comes off. But then right at the end of the film, the mask is there. And then she has to ask him, "Can you take the mask off?" And then they have a kiss. So it doesn't follow its own rules.
Are you saying that there are logical inconsistencies with this film?
I think I am, yeah.
Oh, no. I am shocked.
But yeah, I mean, I think we could talk about how terrible the suit is all day, but let's not. I mean, the suit's not the only bit of CGI that's terrible in this, is it?
No. And I think it's quite difficult when you're doing something quite outlandish like with Green Lantern's powers, because they are entirely derived from the imagination and everything he makes are these giant green constructs. So I think they did as good a job as they could have done. You know, the power that he has is not something that you could do a subtle effect on. He makes giant green fists and things like that. So I think the CGI they use for that is absolutely fine. You know, it's just then they seem to fix every other problem they had with an overabundance of CGI. So the suits and parallax and all of these other things.
Well, even there's the helicopter crash at the gala. I cringed.
It was awful.
It's just like, it was terrible.
Also, there should have been body parts flying everywhere, limbs and things. There seemed to be loads of people in the area of that crash, and they would just sort of dart out the way, but there was these spinning propeller blades and not one arm or leg going flying.
But yeah, I mean, all Hal seems to do is just punch people with a huge green fist, and throws some things. And
he has the planes at the end as well, and a couple of jet fighters.
It's quite nice to have this sort of like callback to him as a pilot, so that's quite nice.
Yeah, I thought the bit where he produces a sword on Oa when he first meets Sinestro, and I kind of thought, why would Hal Jordan, pilot of the 21st century, produce a sword in that instance? At no point have we been taught that he knew about swords, that he was good at sword fighting.
Yeah, I don't know is the answer. That's all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's the bit where he first uses his powers at the bar with Carol and then he gets attacked by 3 guys. First of all, he should have blacked out because he gets punched in the head about 5 times.
Yeah.
He then headbutts someone and then gets thrown quite hardly and hits the back of a truck. Surely you must have like blacked out, mate, or passed out.
I did like how those guys were typical 2000s douchebags, and they then made fun of him because they managed to beat him up in a 3-on-1 fight.
Yeah, it's not very fair, is it? I think we should mention that he blatantly killed those 3 guys.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, they went through walls, they went through windscreens, you know.
There's one of them that hits the top of a van and then lands in the back of it. So, I mean, he might not be dead, he might just be paralysed.
Depends what's in the back.
Well, yeah. But
nice comfy pillows.
There's that guy that he gets thrown through a brick wall. I'm like, you're dead, mate.
Yeah. And we never see them again, in fairness. So
even that wall, that looked fake as well. It looked like those like bouncy bricks that you get.
I'm guessing space police have some sort of immunity against collateral damage like that. It's the same as the real police.
Well, yeah.
Let's cut that bit out. Cutting that bit out. Yeah. But I mean, I actually don't think, the bits where he goes to Oa and he meets Kilowog and Tomar-Re and all of those things, I don't think they're that bad. I think the alien design is quite good.
Yeah.
It's quite a faithful transition from comics to film. It's just everything else is rubbish. And unfortunately, that's about 5 minutes of the film.
Yeah, and I don't really get that. He goes, no, I can't do this. He then leaves. And they just go, yeah, fair enough. You can leave now.
Yeah, we don't need a guardian of that sector. Don't worry about it.
But even he takes the ring home with him.
Yeah.
Surely they would go, well, hold on, if you're leaving, can you give it back, please?
Yeah.
We'll find someone else that's fine. Also, it's not commented why Abin Sur has his own spaceship.
Yeah, because it is in the comics, isn't it? But yeah, they don't mention it in the film. In fact, a lot is changed from that plot line from the comics to the film.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously, let's say you just watched this film, and then you think, well, why does this one guy have a plane or a spaceship?
Yeah, and especially in a film where they've already shoehorned Parallax into it. This is the time to explain why he was using a ship. Is because he had let fear creep into him and doubt, which is why he was using a ship instead of his ring. But they didn't. They just ignored it.
I mean, that fear part does come into it a tiny bit when Hammond is examining his body. And I guess, was that linked? Because that's the same time that Hal first becomes the Green Lantern. Or it's something Hal does. Is that linked? Because that happens at the exact same time.
I think they just cut back and forth between the two things happening.
Fair enough.
The original telling of it in the comics doesn't explain that either, in fairness. It just, an alien crashes in a ship because aliens travelled in ships. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
So, and it was only later that people pointed out that, hold on, Green Lanterns can fly in space. Why was that guy flying a ship? So they then came up with a retcon for why.
So when you say in the comics, I'm assuming you're going back to the 60s or the 40s, can't remember when
50s, I think. But yeah, the original storylines. I've not actually read those. My knowledge of DC, and we'll learn this when we go on to the comics, is a lot less than my knowledge of Marvel just from reading things. I've read a lot less in general. I mean, ultimately, what I liked about the film is the same thing I liked about the comics, which is the sort of...
Hold on. I'm just shocked there that you liked part of this film.
Well, that's it, yeah. But it's the world building and the the life of the Green Lantern Corps. But unfortunately, that's about 10 minutes of the film, and the rest of it is bogged down with these sort of Earth-based plot lines. And there's just so many of them. They dwell on it for so long, and ultimately, I just found myself a bit bored. I found the film really boring. It was a hard 2 hours watch, unlike Fantastic Four. It was an hour and a half. It didn't offend me. It was a bad film, but I watched it without much thought. I did find myself during this film sort of looking at the watch and pausing it and going to get drinks and coming back and going, right, well, we've got another half an hour of this to go.
Yeah, there was 2 points that I paused it, in fact, and I think one was on the 50 mark line. Then I was like, how long's left? I got really shocked. Just like,
yeah,
I thought this was like the last act, and no, I was like, we're still in the first act. But yeah, I think this is the first film that we've covered that I've actually been hoping it to end a bit quicker.
Yeah, it's far too long. But yeah, I think we've covered the film fairly comprehensively there. Shall we move on to the comics?
Yeah, I think we shall.
So, how familiar were you with Green Lantern then?
Well, the Green Lanterns that I knew of were Hal Jordan and John Stewart. Not that much about John Stewart, but I do know he's a character.
Yeah, because he was in the cartoon, wasn't he, in place of Hal Jordan?
Yeah, I again didn't really watch that. I mean, I've not really watched a lot of cartoon series of DC before, apart from the films, but that's a different story. And I recognise the Silver Age Green Lantern.
Yeah. Where do you recognise him from?
I don't know much about him, but I know that he's got an obscure look compared to the other ones. And I have read Justice League Cry for Justice and Rise and Fall.
Okay.
Green Lantern's a part of that. Also knew that Green Lantern and Green Arrow were quite close friends.
Yeah.
And regarding Geoff Johns, I actually recently watched Stargirl. Which was a character that was created by Geoff Johns. Yeah, so again, like always, I've got an idea of the characters, but not read that much about them.
So yeah, so sort of the general outline of the characters and what they can do, and you've read a couple of bits, but not any of the specifics.
Yeah.
So we're reading 2 comics from the 2000s. Which order did you read it in? Did you read Secret Origins first or Rebirth?
So I read Secret Origins first. I'm not too sure why, because the other one was released first.
Yeah, no, but I think it's a good place to start, in fairness. You know, it tells the origin story of Green Lantern, or it retells it. So, no, I think it's a perfectly good place to start. It almost works better as a first-time reader, I think, going into it that way.
So what were your thoughts then, just to start off with?
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, as I said a little earlier, and listeners are probably about to find out, I read a lot more Marvel than I do DC. So with exception of, you know, the big events and major storylines, graphic novels, mostly my DC experience comes from one particular era, which actually Green Lantern Rebirth is one of the comics that got me into DC Universe. So it was that, Secret Six, and Grant Morrison's Batman run. So all around the same sort of time, 2004, 2005. And then I stopped reading shortly after the New 52 relaunch.
Yeah, when did that come out, roughly?
I think it was 2012-ish, something like that. So it was around there. So I read pretty solidly for about 7 or 8 years. But after that, just completely dropped it. And this is the thing that DC do, is they reboot their universe every so often. And it makes a sort of great jumping on point for new readers. But for me, and I'm sure probably some other people, it also makes a very good jumping off point.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to read reboots or refreshes of the same characters, dismissing decades or years of previous lore that they had established.
Yeah, Doctor Who comes to mind. Whenever they have a brand new Doctor and showrunner, they do the same sort of thing where...
Well, no, because with Doctor Who, it's different because the continuity is still there. With DC, they reboot continuity on a regular basis. So the storylines that happened before haven't necessarily happened anymore. Doctor Who has never said, oh, remember all that 50 years that happened before? Didn't happen, doesn't exist. Here's some new stories. That's what DC does on a regular basis.
Okay.
There's a difference between that and a retcon, which, you know, comics retcon things all the time.
So putting it back to the comic then, we did say that the film was just crammed with too much and too many characters. This particular story, it does have quite a few characters, but it doesn't seem overcrowded.
No. And this is what I was saying about the family in the film. There is a arc to each of those characters. They have a purpose for being there, and he resolves something with each of them as it goes. Whereas the film just felt like a lot of characters were dropped in there and then forgotten about.
This story obviously shows the Guardians, it shows Sinestro and Hammond as well.
Yep.
But they don't go into it too much. So I would like to read more about the characters. It's intriguing.
Yeah. And a part of that is because of when it was published, it was issues 29 to 35 of an ongoing run. So it was just in the middle of a monthly comic book, rather than being a sort of standalone and having to tell everything within this one go. It was an origin story, but it was relating to a lot of things that were going on around it in the comics. So there's a lot of references to things like the Blackest Night with Atrocitus and all of that. Whereas Rebirth was its own publication.
And also, I do like how they do have little mentions of things that have happened or characters. It shows that it's a part of this larger world.
Yeah, there's a couple of ones like that, isn't there? Because it's an origin story, but there are references to John Stewart, I think, is the chap he's getting in a fight with in the bar at the beginning when he gets in a fight with the military lads.
I know that panel, but I didn't realise it was a...
Not the guy grabbing the woman, that was just another soldier. But at the table, they're talking to a chap and saying about what a great sniper he is. And I believe that was meant to be John Stewart. There's also a reference later on. Carol is on the phone to Larry Traynor, who is, of course, Negative Man from Doom Patrol.
Oh, that's actually a show that I've not watched. It is on my list of things to watch.
I like it. I've only seen the first series. I don't watch many of those DC CW shows, but yeah, I quite like Doom Patrol. I liked it a lot more than Titans.
Yeah, well, we'll save that for later.
Yeah, for another episode.
Yeah, so I mean, this I think is a good one to start with, and it does make me want to read more.
Okay.
A question actually that I had after was about a guy called William Hand.
Yep.
I came away going, well, who is he? Why is he so important? And then it's actually answered in Rebirth that he becomes Black Hand.
Yes. So Black Hand is one of Green Lantern's older villains, but a fairly throwaway one as far as I know. And the storyline that he then ties into later, Blackest Night, you know, he plays a huge part in that down the line. And it's sort of rehabilitation of that character and making him into a more sort of credible and fleshed out villain is what these comics do. And I'm glad to hear you liked it, because I really like these comics. I'd say they're one of the ones that got me into the DC universe. So yeah, say if you are interested in reading more about them, I think you could do a lot worse than reading the Geoff Johns run.
He does appear to be a writer that does pay close attention to the smaller things.
Yeah, he has a sort of quite a good knowledge of DC lore.
Yeah.
And will combine those things to tie them all together, even if they are sort of retcons. So yeah, generally speaking, it's a fairly straightforward retelling of Hal Jordan's origin. Ship crashes to Earth, this time caused by Atrocitus as opposed to Parallax. He meets the Corps, has a bit of training, sparks things off with Sinestro, beats the enemy, and then becomes a Green Lantern.
Yeah.
I mean, a fairly straightforward story, but you enjoyed it?
Yeah, I did it. This is the era of comic that I have read previously. It's fun to read, it's easy to read, and makes me want to carry on.
Cool. So what did you think of Rebirth then? Because obviously that's a lot less new reader friendly.
I mean, I think it is good that I read this second, because there are callbacks as well, and almost like panel shots, which it shows the background of Hal and his dad and Carol. So I quite like that I just put the other one down, whereas if I flipped it around, I think that I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much, possibly. I don't know.
No, that's fair. I think if you go into this blind, there's a lot less context for what's going on, especially at the beginning of the comic book. It does flesh out those things later on and explains what's going on exactly, but I think if you were going into this as a new reader, you may be a bit lost at the beginning of this. I don't know if that was your experience.
Yeah, I mean, slightly, but I picked it up as I read through, really. I mean, there are characters and there's things that I don't know all about. And even like the very first bit, so the night before, once I'd finished that part, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Let's see where this goes.
Yeah, it's sort of, as I said earlier, in media res. It starts in the middle of a story and then fills in the details a bit later for those out of the loop. So obviously in this story, we've got not just the one Green Lantern, we've got, well, many. But it centres around the human Green Lantern. So what do you make of them? We've got Hal Jordan, Carl Rayner, Guy Gardner and John Stewart.
And a brief appearance of the Silver Age.
And Scott.
Yeah, so as I said, I know John Stewart a little bit. Guy Gardner I've heard about, but again, don't know that much about them. It was fun to read about them and to learn about what type of characters these guys are. And you realise that it's not just all the same person, but all have the same power, and that's it.
Yes, that's a point I've written down here, actually. It's something that Geoff Johns did really well, is establishing that these four different personalities who all essentially had the same power would use them in different ways because of who they are. Yeah, Kyle Rayner is an artist, whereas John Stewart is an architect. And so the way that their powers manifest is different.
Yeah, and the different style of constructs that they make. Yeah, you can definitely see their personalities through how they fight or what they make.
Yeah. So what did you know about the context of why this story came around?
To be honest, not much.
Okay.
I know that you've got Hal, which is a mix of characters, really, because there's Hal, there's Spectre, and a third part of him, but I can't remember what his name is. Or
Parallax is the third part of him. So basically, in sort of the mid-90s, 94, I think it was, they decided they wanted to replace Hal as Green Lantern with Carl Rayner.
Okay.
And so as a part of that, they made Hal Jordan into a villain. They had Coast City destroyed, and he went off the rails after that, attacked Oa, destroyed it, smashed up all of that, killed a load of the Guardians, a load of the Green Lanterns, and obviously then Kyle Rayner came in. There was a huge amount of fan backlash to that, as you can probably imagine.
Yeah.
A character they'd been reading for 40 years.
So while he was this guy who was evil and all sorts of stuff, was he still classed as a Green Lantern, or was he Black Lantern or Yellow Lantern? Or
that sort of thing came later.
Okay.
No, he was still a Green Lantern at that time, and that is when he took on the name Parallax.
Right. Okay.
He then, in the late 90s, I think it was, they tried to redeem him slightly by having him save the Earth. He reignites the sun using his power and dies doing that. And again, that didn't really placate any fans, because he had still done all the horrible things before, and now he was dead.
Yeah. So they were trying to give him this redemption arc.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is their way of rehabilitating him, but also of absolving him of a few of those things that he's done. So instead of him being Parallax, they created this alien entity that had inhabited the Lantern Corps called Parallax, that was a separate thing that had done the things that he was accused of, that had possessed him. So yeah, that's the context behind it. And it does some clever things. It plays into it. There used to be a weakness in Green Lantern's rings where they couldn't tackle the colour yellow.
Yeah.
Which I think is in Secret Origin. And that tied into it as well. Was the reason for that weakness was because the Guardians had trapped Parallax in the central battery of the Green Lanterns. But yeah, it's quite a lot of backstory before you get into Rebirth to figure out what's going on, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't too lost. I mean, when I put the book down, there wasn't like always questions like, well, who's that? Why has this happened? Or these sort of things. I think they cover the backstory well, and then when the actual plot finishes, that arc is created well.
Yeah, you know, even if there is something that's a bit confusing, not having people left behind for too long before, oh, there is an explanation for that, without doing what the film does and going, here's an exposition dump, right, now on with the story.
Yeah. I mean, just, well, we've spoken about actually Pal and Parallax. In regards to the third version of him, so Spectre.
Yep.
It's someone that I have seen before.
Okay.
Because I watched the shows. He's actually part of the Crisis on Infinite Earths, the crossover that they did last year.
Yeah, because I forget that you pretty much watched all of those, haven't you? So you probably actually got a lot of familiarity with some of these minor or lesser known DC characters.
Yeah, so Green Arrow is talking to Speedy. I think in this she's called Mia.
Yes.
So in the show, that character of Speedy is his sister, which is Thea Queen, and Mia, she's his daughter.
Right.
So yeah, these things that I read, I tend to think about what I've seen them in. So John Jones being in Supergirl.
Yeah, and then there's the mainstream ones that everyone's familiar with. There's Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all make appearances in this as well.
Yeah.
And what did you make of Batman in particular, his antagonism towards Green Lantern?
He's so grumpy. I mean, I think he's supposed to be the Dark Knight and he's all brooding. But I think this is a bit over the top. I don't know if there's a backstory to this or history to why he doesn't like Hal that much.
He doesn't come across well, does he?
No.
I think the general thought behind it is, well, Jon Stewart says it at one point, Hal Jordan is the man without fear, and Batman's whole MO relies on fear, so he doesn't like him.
Yeah,
I think there's some antagonism between them in the comics previously, being on the same team, clashing, because, well, as we see in both these comics, he doesn't like authority figures.
And also you see that within film as well.
Yeah, to an extent.
Done quite badly. But anyway. Yeah, so he is grumpy and he is a bit of a dick. But
that's exactly what I've written down, by the way, a bit of a dick.
A bit of a dick. But how John puts it literally sums it up. He can't make Hal be afraid of him because Hal has no fear.
Yeah, but I do agree with you. It is taken to, I think, an extreme in here, and I don't think Batman comes across particularly well in John's writing, which I think does the character a bit of a disservice.
Yeah, he's someone that if you were playing sports outside and then he left and it was his ball, he would take it. No, that's it. I'm going home. I'm taking the ball.
Whereas Superman and Wonder Woman, I think Superman is in just as many scenes as Batman, because they're in pretty much all the same scenes. I can't remember him having a single line in this comic.
I think he says something like, that's enough.
Yeah.
Arguing or something like that.
Yeah, but considering he's Superman, he is extremely passive throughout this comic. He barely has anything to do, but he's just sort of stands there in the background, and then he gets his eyes zapped by Jon Stewart.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that was Geoff Johns' idea because he is so powerful and this is primarily a Green Lantern arc.
Yeah.
To just keep him there, but just not have the limelight.
It's something you see a little bit in comics, and I think it carries over from professional wrestling called jobbing, where you have a powerful character being defeated to show how competent another character is. I remember in Marvel Comics there's quite a famous panel of Black Panther beating the Silver Surfer by getting him in a chokehold or an armbar. You know, one is functionally a strong human, another is a demigod. So yeah, it struck me as a bit of that, is that Geoff Johns was playing favourites with the Green Lanterns and making the Justice League out to be antagonists in this, which I don't think does them any favours if you're a fan of their characters.
Yeah, so I mean, had you read these before, or you read this one before and not Origins, is that right?
No, I read all of these. As I say, Rebirth is the comic that got me into DC, and then I read all the way through up to just after Flashpoint and the New 52 relaunch.
Right, okay.
Pretty much every DC title, I think.
You read them the swapped way than I did. So you read this one first and then you went back to Secret Origins.
Yeah, originally I read them that way around, and I read them that way around this time as well.
Do you think that helped doing that way, or I don't think it mattered?
I had a bit more context for what was going on, but I did wonder if you didn't know who a lot of these people were, whether or not you would go into this understanding, the intricacies, the whole, as I say, 90s betrayal of Hal Jordan is something that's steeped in continuity. So if you're not familiar with that, how much you would be, even if you had read Secret Origin.
I mean, there are bits at the start of this one when John and Guy are talking, and you can tell by just what they're talking about that there is some sort of history with Hal, or Guy does not think he should be part of the Green Lanterns anymore, or there's definitely something there that I was a little bit, confused about.
Yeah. So at this point in his history, Guy wasn't a Green Lantern anymore and didn't have a ring.
Yeah.
And obviously he gets it back in this story arc as well. And that's what actually I quite like about this, is it manages to bring back Hal, rehabilitate him without doing the easy thing, which would be to kill off Kyle or to make the other Green Lanterns less. It brings back all of the Green Lanterns, it brings back some of the Green Lantern Corps, and it makes them all seem independent, individual, and, just as good as each other, without just saying, right, here comes Hal, isn't he the best?
Yeah, so at this point, towards the start of this book, Guy's the warrior, isn't it?
Yes, he is, yeah.
Because he's got the W on his t-shirt, but then once everyone does, come together towards the end of it, and they're fighting... Is it Parallax they're fighting, or is it Spectre they're fighting right at the end?
Parallax,
yeah. So you see them all, and you also see Kilowog, is
yep.
it? Which I think that last sort of fight scene is really good to see, as we said, how each separate character creates something.
So after reading this, who was your favourite Green Lantern?
I mean, I am a fan of the classics, no matter what it is. So I think Hal would probably still be my favourite. I don't think we see enough of Kyle to make a choice, really. I like him, but he's not going to be pushed up the list. I think Guy was a bit of a dick, but not as much of a dick as Batman. Yeah, so I think it is, I like Hal, then John, then probably Kyle, and then Guy.
See, Guy is my favourite. I like Guy Gardner a lot. But if you had just read this, I would understand not having that opinion. But after this, they relaunched Green Lantern with Hal as the main character. They later relaunched Green Lantern Corps, a separate comic which focused on a lot of the other Green Lanterns, fleshing out those characters. So from that, Guy Gardner became my favourite Green Lantern.
Well, there you go. If you branched out a little bit, would that still be the same? I mean, people like Kilowog or Sinestro, other ones like that?
Yeah, I think probably so, because a lot of those other characters are fleshed out a bit more in Green Lantern Corps, but, the human characters still get more focus. But I did like how a lot of those alien characters were included in the film as Easter eggs. In fact, actually, that seems like the perfect time. Shall we move on to Iain's Egg Hunt?
Cue the music.
Iain's Egg Hunt. Iain's Egg Hunt. Iain's Egg Hunt.
I'm not yoking you.
So this is the part of the show where Iain highlights some of the Easter eggs in this week's film. What have you got?
So, just carrying on from Kilowog, in both the comic and the film, just before he trains Hal, he says, this is the worst day of your life, which I quite like that.
Does he say it like Ray Winstone? This is the worst day of your life.
Probably not quite as Cockney. But yeah, he does say, this is the worst day of your life, which I do like it when the film uses the same wording or similar wording to the comics.
Yeah, because he used is it Poozers as well, which is sort of Kilowog's catchphrase, as it were.
Yeah, that as well. But yeah, also regarding the pilot call signs, so in the film, Carol and Hal both have them on their helmets. So Hal's is Highball, which his dad's was the Flying Martini. So they're both cocktails.
Yeah.
Quite a nice little touch. And Carol's is Sapphire, which is a callback or a call forward, I guess, to when she becomes a star Sapphire. I think they might call themselves the Violet Corps, but I don't quite know if that's canon or not.
That was, sort of a bit of retcon there. So they made them the Violet Corps later on.
And also, I mean, during the film, I got tones of the Superman theme within the music. And so I found out that the editor of this film was the same guy who also did Superman 1 and 2.
Oh, right.
And called Stuart Bard or Bird, I'm not too sure how his last name is pronounced. And then also one final one to end on. As we've said, Hal is a bit of a douche, but he has a nephew that he turns up to his party and he passes him this little gift, this clear see-through plane, which I suppose could be an Easter egg for Wonder Woman's invisible jet.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a stretch, but could be.
It could be. I didn't really think about it, but I get it's a kind of a weird gift, isn't it? So, yeah. If it is that, that's probably the most world building they did in the whole film.
Yeah, I mean, also, not really an Easter egg, but I did find out that in an early draft of the script, Superman was supposed to be part of this.
All right.
Or there was a reference to Clark Kent, but that was cut, probably because it wouldn't make sense.
That didn't stop them for the rest of the film.
Yeah, and I can't find this, but it says it online on several sites. Apparently, there is a sign for Central City, which is obviously the home of the Flash.
Yeah.
But I went through the scenes quite carefully and I could not find it. So I think it's one of these little online trivia that's not actually real. I think someone's quoted it and it's been quoted over and over again and it's not actually part of the film.
You couldn't find a screenshot anywhere, or?
No, literally can't find it in there at all. But if someone can, then please do point out where it is.
Some people just aren't as dedicated to the eggs as you are.
And that's all that I've got for you guys this week.
No, thank you very much for that. Shall we get back to the films and comics and conclude the episode?
Yes, I think we shall.
So just generally then, what were your opinions of the film and the comic book?
I mean, I think it is a terrible film. There are points that I like. I mean, as I said, I like Ryan Reynolds in the film.
And that's about it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, like I said previously, if this was someone else in that role, I probably wouldn't enjoy this film. Simple as that, really.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, no, I didn't enjoy this film. As I say, it bored me to tears. So I won't be in a hurry to watch this again.
No, me neither, if I'm honest.
What about the comics, though? You've already said you interested in perhaps reading more?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably read more current DC stuff than you have, because you said that you dropped out around 2012-ish.
Reading regularly, yeah. I still read storylines from time to time.
Okay.
But I don't read ongoings anymore.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I was trying to think about this actually, and I think that I've potentially read more DC than I have Marvel overall. But yeah, I mean, I think these two books are a very good point to start. I would probably recommend to read Secret Origins first, and then do Rebirth.
I think that's fair.
But for someone like you who knows about the history of Hal Jordan, it doesn't so much matter.
No, but I do think you're right. I think if you're coming into this fresh and you haven't got any familiarity with the characters or the storylines, I think Secret Origin is a really nice place to jump on, even though it comes sort of in the middle of an ongoing run. I think then you can go back and read Rebirth and then Green Lantern from the beginning of that run.
So yeah, I would advise people to read these comics.
Yeah.
And the film, maybe not. I think it's a film that suffers from the time it came out, really. I think that if it came out now, it could be an entirely different film.
Yeah, but I mean, if anything, Justice League and Batman vs. Superman have shown that they're still not much better at making films nowadays.
Well, yeah.
So, I mean, it was fairly widely slated at the time as well. I think this film has a pretty poor critical rating on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic and things like that. So I don't think it was ever thought of as good.
I'm assuming that you would not recommend a film.
I definitely would not recommend the film, but I would highly recommend the comics. As a Green Lantern and that whole run was one of my favourites when I was reading it.
Cool.
So, any other business?
Yeah, so as I've already said, I am a fan of the CW verse,
Right.
which they've now renamed it.
Is that what it's called now? The CW verse?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Wow. Because it was called the Arrowverse, wasn't it?
Yeah, they've literally renamed it the last couple months, maybe.
Is that because Arrow's ended, I suppose?
I guess so. I don't know. But they do a crossover every year of all of these shows. And the last one that they did was Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Right, yeah.
So they use a lot of footage to fold in all of these shows and films. So they did use some footage from this film. So they've established that there is a Green Lantern Corps somewhere
In the CW verse.
as part of this. But also right at the end of the 5th episode, I think it is, one of the characters called John Diggle,
Right.
he approaches this sort of like shiny green sort of light. It then implies that he'll become the new Green Lantern. The character itself was a character purely for the show,
Right.
but they took his last name from a writer, and then John, I'm pretty sure they took from John Stewart.
All right. So it all sort of comes full circle.
Yeah, so I think it's one of those things that fans have pushed for or petitioned for. It's not really canon, but the idea's there. But also, at some point, I believe there was a Green Lantern Corps show coming to HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't get that over here, so I don't know how we can watch that.
I'm sure there's ways and means.
But yeah, there is the idea then that there will be a new TV show and potentially he'll come into the films as well at some point, I hope.
Yeah, I think they're moving towards that, aren't they? DC is a sort of combined film and television universe. And I think it's going to sort of play into Zack Snyder's Justice League, which is also going to be launching on HBO Max.
Yeah, the Schneider cut.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a scene in Justice League that you do see a Green Lantern dies at a battle and then the ring just goes and flies off. But, we'll see what happens in regarding to that.
If anything.
So now we've finished talking about Green Lantern. Should we move on to Ask the Teapot?
All right then. Ask the Teapot. Okay, so following on from last episode's questions, at Toby_Polar asks, which comic book character needs to be brought to the big screen that hasn't previously, and who should portray them? Okay, so it's my favourite thing, fan casting. So I'll start by saying the character that should be brought to the big screen is Catman. Catman and the Secret Six.
Your favourite.
Love him. And I think, who should play him? Or if you were playing against Ben Affleck's Batman, the only person who could play him would be Matt Damon.
I would pay to see that.
But for a serious answer, if you want someone younger, someone like Dacre Montgomery or Billy Magnuson, up-and-coming actors, would be good. Iain?
Yeah, I mean, I think we both have an issue with fan casting.
You love fan casting.
Well, I like to see what people think about fan casting. I'm not very good at fan casting myself. I think characters that I would love to see is Gambit, because I'm a fan of his from the cartoons.
Yeah.
And he's not been part of the X-Men films in the past. I know there was the whole thing about Channing Tatum.
Yeah, and he was in X-Men Origins Wolverine. I know we try and block that from our memory.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that film. Well, there you go. So that doesn't work then. But I don't really have anyone to play him.
Okay.
But then the second one I thought was Beta Ray Bill.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that would be purely a CGI character, like the Hulk. Because I think that regarding Thor, we've got a lot of his backstory. Obviously, there is Thor 4 coming out. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the right time to sort of pass the mantle across.
Yeah, because they might be doing that with Jane Foster, is passing it on. But yeah.
Yeah, again, don't really have someone to play him.
Well, if he's a CGI creation, it's probably going to be Doug Jones with someone else's voice, right?
So we'll get Doug Jones to be the CGI person and then have... Who played Gollum?
Andy Serkis.
Yeah, get him to do the voice and Doug Jones can be the CGI.
Okay.
There you go.
That's an interesting choice, but all right.
Why not?
Failing that, let's get Dev Patel. Next question. At design_dialogue on Twitter asks, for someone who has never read Scott Pilgrim, what would you recommend? The original black and white or the colour editions?
Okay. I mean, I've not read the colour. I think you've read both, haven't you?
I have.
I would recommend to read the black and white version first.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I went online and had a quick look around and I found out that the black and white box set can be picked up for under £20. Mm-hmm. That's all of them. The colour box set can be found for around £40 to £50, and the hardcover colour editions will set you back around £20 each, give or take.
Wow.
So that would be about, £100 to £120 total.
Mm.
So I'd say if you've never read Scott Pilgrim and you are interested in getting into it, then yeah, definitely pick up the black and white original editions first. And then if you like that, I would say skip over the coloured box set and try and get the hardcover editions if you are like me and a bit of a fanatic. They're really nice editions for any collection if money is no object.
Yeah, I think that would be quite a nice set to have.
Yeah, I think the better thing with those hardback editions is just to pick them up as and when you can for about £20 each rather than going out and buying them in one go, because they can be a bit costly. But anyway, the next question comes from Matt from Bournemouth, and he asks, I was hoping you could maybe talk about the most obscure graphic novel or comic series you've read and trying to sell Iain on it. Is it real? Is it shite? Iain can be the judge. I will specify that he says Iain as in I-A-I-N, so I believe he wants me to try and describe it to you.
Go on, what's your most obscure one then?
Well, actually, one of the most obscure ones that I've read is one that you bought for me, a copy of NFL SuperPro, the Marvel comic from the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know you've bought a few of these as well, haven't you? Because we both like our American football.
Yeah, it's a 12-issue run, I think it is.
Yeah.
I think I now own about 8 or 9 of them, not in a complete run.
Yeah.
First one that you said there includes Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very quickly, though.
Yeah. Well, they often did this with these corporate tie-in comic books, is they would throw in a mainstream superhero. So the next one I'm actually going to talk about had an X-Men crossover. But, I mean, for those who don't know, NFL's SuperPro, it's about a former American football player who suffers a knee injury, and so he can no longer play football, so he instead puts on an indestructible super suit that costs $5 million.
Jesus.
A fortune in order to fight crime as SuperPro. For some reason, the suit also looks like just an American footballer's outfit. I did a bit of research into this, and the writer Fabian Nicieza, who actually went on to write X-Men after Chris Claremont left, he has gone on record to say that he only did the comic so that he would get free NFL tickets.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I go, yeah, sure, why not?
Sure.
There's also one issue that includes Captain America as well.
Yeah, and actually that's a good time because the next comic I'm about to talk about started off in an issue of Captain America. And it's another corporate tie-in, but actually kind of links to what you were talking about last week. The comic itself is called Team America.
Oh, okay. So I'm assuming that this isn't the film.
It is nothing to do with the film, no.
Okay.
Team America were a tie between Marvel and a toy line that were looking to sort of capitalise on the popularity of Evel Knievel. So motorcyclists doing stunts and things like that. So they created this team called Team America, who were a team of 5 motorcyclists who were all mutants, but didn't have any powers in their own right, but they could channel their skills on motorbiking into a 6th man called the Marauder, who would then be a really good motorcycle rider.
Right, okay. I mean, to be honest, this does sound shit.
Yeah, so that was pretty much it. And unsurprisingly, they haven't appeared much since their initial appearance in the 80s. I think they were renamed at some point from Team America to the Thunder Riders. But yeah.
It just keeps getting worse.
But yeah, those are the 2 that came to mind for Matt's question.
Wow, I mean, I'll be honest, you've not sold me on the Thunder Riders.
Have I not? Oh, sorry.
No.
But SuperPro, you've already invested in that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've read the first one and I've read, I think, the second one.
So, no, thank you, Matt, for your questions.
I would just like to throw in something there. So, since Matt has dropped us that question on our Facebook page, he actually asked his girlfriend to marry him.
Oh, okay.
So...
Did she say yes?
Yes, she did. Just thought we'd say congratulations.
Congratulations, Matt.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, congratulations, and thank you to all of our question askers for this week. We'll be back next week with more Ask the Teapot. If, like Iain, you enjoyed Green Lantern and are hoping to read more, then as discussed, I would highly recommend Geoff Johns' run, which began in 2004 with Rebirth and has been collected into various omnibuses and trade paperbacks. It also span off into other titles such as Green Lantern Corps and a company-wide crossover, Blackest Night. If you have a question for Ask the Teapot, then you can email us at becometheteapot@hotmail.com or tweet us at becometheteapod using the hashtag AskTheTeapot. We are now also on Instagram, so follow us there for all sorts of little comic book and behind-the-scenes bits. Next episode, it's Christmas, or at least close to it. So pour yourself a glass of eggnog, grab yourself a mince pie, and dust off your DVD of that most magical of films, Iron Man 3. We'll be reading Extremis by Warren Ellis, a storyline that, as far as I can remember, has absolutely nothing to do with Christmas. But we'll throw in a few sleigh bells and a ho-ho-ho just to see how festive we can make it. See you then.
Bye, everybody. In brightest day, in blackest night, no DC movie shall escape our sight.